We don't have a gavel, so I'm going to just knock on the front. The House Committee on Elections will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Morrison.
Present.
Miles. Johnson. Click.
Present.
Miller.
Present.
Simmons.
Here.
Wood.
Here.
A quorum is present, and members, I would like to also introduce a new member that's come to visit with us today that was elected to House District 50, Cecilia Israel, and she is here to observe and watch the process of our committee and getting input. So, Cecilia, welcome. We're glad to have you here this morning.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, members, we're going to take up our final 3 charges that we've been asked to look at for the upcoming session. And we do have some witnesses on a short timeline, so we may have to call some out of order as it relates to when they registered, just to make sure that people can get their flights and everything. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to begin with charge 4, which is our online voter registration. The charge says examine online voter registration systems in other states, study the costs and security concerns, weigh the pros and cons of online voter registration, and make recommendations. And so the chair will now call David Becker with the Pew Charitable Trust, who is here neutrally to give us some testimony. If you'll just come up and state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm David Becker. I'm the Director of Election Initiatives for the Pew Charitable Trust. We work all across the country to improve the accuracy, convenience, cost effectiveness, and security of elections in all 50 states. One area where we've done a lot of research is voter registration. And talking with election officials all around the country, voter registration seems to be one of the biggest issues that they have to wrestle with. And you can understand why. It's very difficult to keep our voter lists up to date in our highly mobile society. About 1 in 8 or 1 in 9 Americans moves in any given year. And being able to keep up with that pace of mobility is difficult for election officials. And when there's a problem with the voter lists, they resonate throughout the entire process. You can feel them not only with the problems that inaccurate voter lists themselves create, but then mail gets sent out to the wrong person at the wrong address, which is costly. It leads to integrity problems, and it can lead to long lines and provisional ballots when someone goes to the wrong polling place because they moved and they didn't know how to get their voter registration up to date. In our research, one of the most important reforms to come around has been online voter registration. It is one of those rare win-wins in government. It not only leads to more accurate rolls and creates more convenience for voters and election officials alike, it also saves a ton of money. And election officials all across the country are discovering that it is not a new idea. I think you have the presentation I've given you all, and there's some maps in the back. In 2002, only the first state implemented online voter registration. That was Arizona. It took another 6 years for the second state to implement online voter registration. Washington State joined in 2008. By 2012, 13 states had offered online voter registration, and that number is now at 19, with several more states, the states in yellow on the map, having already passed legislation or are currently building systems. Illinois is going to come online, for instance, by July 1st. And the states in pink on the map, if you've got it in color, states like Florida, Massachusetts, and many other states have pending legislation considering online voter registration. If you look at the states that have implemented online voter registration, this is a tremendously geographically and politically diverse group. You've got states that are as different as Kansas, Louisiana, Georgia, Utah, Arizona, and California, New York, Maryland, and Oregon, all offering online voter registration. Now, why has this become the trend, which is even picking up steam? Well, firstly, online registration is highly efficient. Because you can transfer all of the activity that's currently being done on paper to a purely electronic process. You remove all of that paper processing and all the data entry errors that it can create, especially since so much of that paper comes in just the last 30 to 45 days before a presidential election, when election offices are most busy, when they're recruiting poll workers, training poll workers, finding polling places, mailing ballots out, getting ballots back in. they also have to deal with all of this paper coming in, and that can lead to data entry errors and to costs and inefficiencies. What this also does is it gives voters direct control over their own information. So whereas now voters in Texas, when they register to vote, they have to put all of their information on a paper form and hand it to a third-party group or to a government employee, the voter is directly inputting their information via a secure website into the voter registration database. It eliminates that paper middleman. These systems in many states are also being optimized for mobile devices, which is very convenient for voters, so they can do it either on their mobile devices, which now I think over 60% of people access the internet via mobile devices, and that number is only going to grow over time. And it doesn't, though, change the nature of the electorate, and I think that's a very important point. This is not a new innovation, so we've been able to study this over time. If you look at states that have implemented online voter registration, those who use online registration look exactly like those who were using registration before online was implemented. We don't even have any evidence that it's increasing the number of people registered. What we do have evidence of is that it's transferring a lot of the paper activity that was highly inefficient and costly and insecure to electronic activity. To give you some statistics, in California, which has offered online registration now for nearly 2 years, about 47% of those using online registration are Democrats, 20% are Republicans. Why so many Democrats as opposed to Republicans? That's exactly what the California voter rolls look like. If you look, on the other hand, at Utah, where 49% of those registering online are Republicans and only 13% are Democrats, actually trailing far behind independents in Utah as well. Why does it look like that in Utah? Because that's what the voter rolls look like in Utah. It's basically the same kind of percentages in every state that we see already existing on the rolls. In fact, if you look at a state like Maryland, which is overwhelmingly Democratic in registration, online registrants are actually slightly more Republican than the paper registrants are in that state. So we're seeing this consistently across the United States. Basically, online registrants look exactly like those who are already registered in the state. Another big advantage of online registration is its accuracy. Because voters are directly putting their information in, you get a lot less data entry errors. The person who's registering has a lot more interest in making sure their name is spelled correctly, their address is correct. All of that information is accurate. Birth dates, which are notoriously bad in the voter registration databases, all of that is going to be correct and often checked against the motor vehicles database. So you've also not only got the check of the individual making sure that their information is right, that information is then checked against the motor vehicles database, and in real time, it can even, if there's a typographical error in there, the address doesn't match or something like that, the voter, while they're still sitting at their laptop or working on their mobile device, can be informed, hey, is this right? Because it's not matching what we have on file, rather than getting it on a paper form maybe weeks or months after that person has filled it out and you don't have that person interact with anymore to correct the information. What that leads to is also an ability to move beyond the human review of some of these paper records. Because if you've got someone who has physically presented themselves to a motor vehicles office, as most people have to do at least once, shown whatever documentation they have to show to prove that they are who they are, and then you can check their information against that in real time, you can be fairly certain that you've got the right person registering and they've got the right information. And they have to have information that only they, I'll talk about this in just a minute, that only they would possess, things like their driver's license number, perhaps the audit number on their actual state driver's license card, things that only they would possess. I mentioned the cost savings of online voter registration. Again, since it's been around for a long time, we've been able to collect a lot of data on how much money has been saved. First, it does cost something to build an online registration system, but the costs are remarkably small. We did a survey of all 13 states that offered online voter registration in 2012. The average cost amongst those 13 states was $240,000 to build the entire system. In every single case, states recoup that money in a very short period of time. I'll give you some examples of that. In Arizona, what they've discovered is they've long since recouped their initial investment. Maricopa County, where Phoenix is, saved $1.4 million in just the 4-year period from 2008 to 2012, well beyond what they had initially invested. And they've calculated it's about a savings of about 80 cents per registration form, every electronic transaction that comes in. And by now, it's about 3/4 of all transactions come in electronically in Arizona. Every one of them saves 80 cents compared to what it would cost on a paper form. California, I think, is remarkably instructive. California, like Texas, highly mobile, highly diverse populations. They put it in place, online voter registration in place, offered it 1 month before the general election in 2012, before the voter registration deadline. Nearly 1 million people used it. mostly to update existing registrations, and every one of those saved over $2 to the state of California and to the counties who were processing that information. So even though California spent a little more, actually they spent nearly $2 million on the cost for their online voter registration system, way more than any other state has. Even then, in a 1 month period of time, they recouped the entire cost in those transactions. So we've seen this in other states as well. Colorado calculates they're saving over $1 probably per transaction. Every single state is reporting tremendous cost savings that recoups the initial investment, and afterwards is just additional cost savings that they can enjoy and maybe use to redirect funds to other areas that they might want to redirect those funds. I mentioned the security briefly. Online registration is much more secure than paper. I mentioned how most people get registered in Texas and frankly all over the United States still. They put all of this information on a paper form and hand it to a stranger. With online registration, they are themselves in control of their personal information. And in order to start a record, they need to put in information that only they would have. In every state, it's date of birth, driver's license numbers, pretty much. There are some exceptions to this, but in most of the states. Many states require the last four of the social, and then some states request something like an issue date that would only be on your physical license, or an audit number on your license card, something like that, in order to initiate a transaction for online registration. Importantly, if you don't have any of that information, no states have gotten rid of the paper forms. There's still a paper alternative for anyone that doesn't have that information, which I think is very important. But what states are seeing is that even though some who are eligible might not have access to online registration is a rising tide that floats all boats, because election offices are able to redirect their resources to those communities that are most likely to need it. Arizona is instructive in this way. You can imagine there are large Native American reservations in Arizona. The entire northeastern corner of the state is are Native American reservations, and there's not good, reliable internet access in those areas. But because they have 75% of their registrations coming in electronically now, they can focus those resources on the areas where people really need them, rather than using a much more unfocused approach to try to reach everybody at once, which is what, if you only have paper, you have to do. So again, this secure information that only the person would then be run through secure networks. There's encryption involved in every state. There are audit logs to make sure that that if you need to go back and see if anything is, you need to take a look at a transaction, see who's been accessing the system, you can do that. And then one of the other things that states are able to do is they're able to track where this activity is coming from. So if they see too much activity coming from a particular IP address, they can flag that. They might segregate it. They might firewall that off for a period of time while they investigate. It could be legitimate. It could be a group who's registering voters, and they're registering voters through a single IP address. It could also be some kind of fraudulent or hacking activity. And in either case, because you're able to track the source of it, it's much more secure than paper, where you really can't track the source of the paper all the way back through the process. Duplicates can be identified in online voter registration in real time. I'm sure you've all come in contact with this, but oftentimes right before an election, third-party groups are active in voter registration. They'll ask people, they'll register, and people say, I don't know. You know, I think I am, but maybe not. There's no harm in filling out another form. Maybe that form just has a slight difference. Maybe instead of David Becker, it says Dave Becker. Maybe I moved since then, and it can't be matched to my previous record, and so you get duplicate records on your list. In a good online voter registration system, one of the things you can do in real time, you can ping the information against the voter list to see if that same voter is already on the list, and tell the voter, reassure the voter, oh, we've already got you on the list and your information's up to date. You don't need to do anything else. Or if there's a change, either they want to change their address, or they might even want to change their party preference in some states before a presidential primary or something like that. They'd have that opportunity to do that, whatever the state wants to offer them, and they can be prompted to do that. Also, very importantly, again, 19 states now have it. Many states have offered it for some time. There has not been one single reported instance of voter registration fraud occurring through the online systems. Paper can't say that. But because they're able to track so much of this activity through the online systems, they can say that every one of those transactions has been genuine. And because individuals need to have so much information in order to access the system, they can be assured of that as well. We've done some polling in this area to see how well online registration is viewed. About 61% of voters in Texas support online voter registration. That majority support tracks across every single demographic group: men, women, Republicans, Democrats, young voters, older voters, whites, African Americans, Hispanics. All majority support for online voter registration. This is not unique. We've done national polling and polling in other states as well, and this very much tracks what we see amongst all the states. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Members, who has questions? Representative Clark.
You mentioned that some states have got the ability to do this with mobile apps. The question that I have is, when you're using a mobile device to do that, and I've also read about monitoring IP addresses, is there a static or a dynamic IP address on a mobile device?
So you could, I actually don't know the answer to that. That's the first time I've gotten that question. Thank you for that. I'm going to try to find out the answer to that. What I know is that the states have basically, I believe it's a static IP address, but don't hold me to that. What I think, what states who have done this have seen, and this is probably more commonly on tablet devices than on smartphones because it's a little easier to input data on that. But when groups are using a device like that, it does appear to originate from a single IP address in most cases. What has worked very well in some states, Colorado is a good example of this. The groups that are registering voters are going and talking to the Secretary of State in advance to let them know, we're going to be doing this, by the way, and here's the dates and times we're going to be doing it, and here's our IP addresses. So if you see this activity, don't flag it, or if you need to flag it, call us and we'll tell you whether or not it's legitimate activity. And again, because a record can't be initiated unless this personal information is input, it's not like someone can just start going through the phone book and registering voters. You need to have driver's license numbers and other things to do that. There has been circumstances where states have seen hacking attempts, but in every case they've been able to flag them right away and firewall them off. And those can even come from overseas. But of course, any state database sees those same hacking attempts. It's no different than the security that I know Texas is already engaged in and many other states to ensure that kind of stuff doesn't affect the records.
Is there one of the concerns that I see is when you are using a third party's computer, I would be concerned that folks that intend to do identity theft would go to a community fair or event and do voter registration and actually capture some of the more sensitive personal information for the purpose of identity theft. Not so much voter fraud,
right,
but identity theft. When you've got a social or at least a portion in a driver's license, that is kind of your gateway to do a lot of things.
Yeah, it's a very good concern that you're raising, and of course it's a concern that relates to paper as well. I mean, you could bring a stack of paper voter registration forms and anyone could do it really and just start collecting all of that information and inputting it into your own database. One of the things that we're starting to see, there are groups out there that are aware of this, legitimate voter registration groups that want to they want to keep track of the people they're registering for purposes of voter engagement. That's understandable. But they don't want the driver's license number. They don't want the date of birth. They don't, other than just to know that they're 18 and eligible. So what they're starting to do is they're starting to build websites that overlay the state online voter registration sites that just collect the information they need, maybe email address, name, zip code, so that they know where they live. And then they can, and then it redirects them to the online system so that none of the information actually flows through the servers or the websites of these organizations. I think one of the things that online registration affords that paper can't is the opportunity to work with these groups in advance and encourage them, maybe even offer them a built-in way of doing this so that you can direct more of this activity online and do it in such a way that these third-party groups aren't collecting information that, from my experience, the legitimate ones, and the vast majority are legitimate, don't want anyway. but they can't. There's no way for them not to collect it off the paper forms. It's on the paper forms. They've got it, even if they don't want it. So they'd much rather have an email address than a driver's license number. And I think there are ways with online registration that can be done. Rock the Vote, for instance, has an app that does that right now that the Presidential Commission on Election Administration recommended. And there are other apps that could be built if that's not quite the right one. And that app is available. There are states that literally have just taken the code and built it onto their mobile sites.
Now, the states that have already implemented this, if you've got a third-party organization that is out registering voters, do they have to register or be like, in the instance of Texas, they're a deputy voter registrar? Right. Do they have to do that, or can anybody?
It varies. It's really up to the state. There are some states that require pre-registration for anyone who wants to go out and register other voters, and there are some states that say anyone can do it. I think where states have seen the most efficiencies is where they can allow the broadest use of the online platform, so where they can offer them to as many people who might otherwise be out doing registration this opportunity. I think they're seeing more efficiencies because what they're seeing is activity that they otherwise would see coming in paper being transferred to the electronic sites.
You also, in your earlier presentation, you were talking about the cost savings. Mm-hmm. Is there a standard template that the different states were using as to calculating those cost savings, or is it kind of apples to oranges or apples to apples?
You've hit on one of the great challenges in this field that we've been trying to navigate for some time, which is how do you measure the true costs of election administration? And of course, you never can get quite to an apples-to-apples comparison. As you can imagine, there are states that are highly centralized that run this all through a central state entity. Alaska and Delaware are great examples of that. And then there are states that are highly decentralized, Texas, of course, being one of them, where the counties and localities have all the responsibilities for this. So being able to come up with a complete apples-to-apples comparison isn't quite right. One of the things, for instance, that 80-cent number comes just from the costs of the processing of the paper forms, that 80-cent number from Arizona I mentioned. So that's that's kind of the low bar. They're actually saving much more because they're no longer mailing things out to people who live at the wrong address, who are able to go online and conveniently update their registrations. They're seeing fewer provisional ballots that they might otherwise have because the voter rolls are more up to date. So there are all these cost savings, some on the front end from the paper processing, some on the back end from the benefits that flow all throughout the process. And we are having, there is a challenge in trying to get a lump sum number. So, but I think what we're seeing is it's probably somewhere in the 80 cents to $2.34 that we're seeing in California that most states can expect to see savings on. There's no dispute that that there are cost savings, that every single one of the states has seen significant cost savings and recoupment of their investment.
Okay. Two of the states, I believe Washington State and Maryland, have had some issues regarding the security of the data on their website. Is there anything that we can learn from those two states going forward?
So that issue was those two states, and I'm a Maryland resident, so I should say I'm very familiar with this. The way their motor vehicles agencies issue driver's license numbers uses a Soundex system, and those numbers can be generated knowing only someone's name and birth date. So my 13-digit Maryland driver's license number. I was a little bit surprised by this, but I can go onto a website and just put in my name and birth date, and you can get that entire 13-digit driver's license number. I don't know if Texas uses this same system. That system, first of all, they saw no fraud as a result of that. It'd be a pretty it wouldn't be a particularly effective way of committing fraud to try to go in and generate one by one these voter registration changes. But they saw no fraud. As soon as it was brought to their attention, what they did do is they added another piece of information that only that individual would have, perhaps the issue date on their license, which is not the same, certainly on my license, as the birth date. It's different. There are states that might require the last four of social. So even if someone could get access to this driver's license number, you can create other pieces of information that would prevent that. So their sites are now secure as well.
You said that there's not been any voter fraud or registration fraud that was identified, but was there any identity theft that might have resulted as a result?
To my knowledge, there have been no instances of identity theft. None of the states that we've worked with, that we've talked to about this, have seen that from the online registration activity. I don't think we have really good stats on whether there's been any identity theft that's generated from paper activity. I think that the way the states have built these sites has been remarkably secure. And because they can track, unlike sometimes we have to talk about how online voter registration is different than the idea of online voting. Online voting is a big challenge. I think most experts agree we're not quite ready for it yet, because in order for online voting to be effective, you need to be able to divorce a person's identity from their vote. It makes it very hard to audit a system like that. For voter registration to be effective, you have to do exactly the opposite. You have to be able to track a transaction to a particular individual and confirm their identity. And so states have used this to create secure systems to be able to ensure that it's as secure as any other online transaction. And if there was a problem, it's a problem that can be identified and reconstructed so that someone's right to vote isn't being impacted. Someone isn't going to have their voter registration changed against their will. There have been absolutely no instances of that. And in fact, you also can't do any of the other sometimes mischief that we see in voter registration. I sometimes talk about the Mickey Mouse or Peter Pan registrations, but I went to a law school with a guy named Peter Pan, so I guess that doesn't quite work. But those registrations that don't lead to fraudulent votes, because no one's showing up with the name Mickey Mouse, but they can get on the rolls, those cannot be originated on an online system, because to access the system you need to be able to connect to a record in a motor vehicles database or another state agency database that someone has physically presented themselves and created.
Thank you.
Representative Wu.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would it be fair to say that I'm making some broad assumptions here. Would it be fair to say that there's not a lot of identity theft related to this, just because there's no credit card numbers attached to it, there's no bank routing numbers attached to it, it's just probably not very worthwhile for hackers to go after?
We haven't done research on it, but I think it's a pretty good assumption. I mean, if you were trying to break in and get some data on individuals, you wouldn't be doing it through an
you go
online
after Target or somebody.
Yeah, or you'd go after the source databases somewhere to get at this data. The voter lists are not. In fact, most of the data on the voter list is public anyway, and you can just pay a small fee and get it.
Okay. One question, I'm not sure if you're able to answer this. For the states that required deputy registrar training and registration, what was their rationale for? Because I know in Texas, the rationale for having trained deputy registrars is that they had to carry the ballots or the forms back, and they had to handle forms and handle other people's information. That they therefore had to be trained to handle it properly, handle it timely. In a transaction where if someone goes to a shopping mall and just sets up a kiosk and say, "Hey, would you like to update your voter registration?" Essentially, all they're telling the person is, "Here, you should update your registration. Here's a computer. Go for it."
So we haven't done specific research on this for the various reasons that states might make that policy decision to deputize individuals who are doing registration. What we have heard from some states is when you're reliant entirely upon paper, there's often a lag time between when the paper is filled out and when the paper is delivered. And that lag time, we hear stories, mostly anecdotal stories, of paper being delivered after the registration deadline, the voter doing everything they were supposed to do, but whoever was holding on to the paper didn't deliver it to the registrar in time. And I think your point is well taken that in online registration, that's not a concern, because the transaction is occurring in many cases in real time, where once it's submitted electronically, it's submitted to the registration official at the same time through some means. Now, whether that person has to look at it physically or whether there's some automated process for processing some of them, that might take some additional time. But there's no lag time of days or weeks or even months between the filling out of the application and the delivery.
And in all practicality, a deputy voter registrar or someone that's just doing registration wouldn't really even assist in the process. I mean, the person enters their name, whips out their driver's license, enters the number, puts in their address, and either it works or it doesn't.
Right. I think that's exactly right. I mean, they're really just providing the device
Right.
at that point and the connectivity. In fact, what I think you'll see third-party groups, and we're seeing this to some degree in some states, is they'd much rather than physically being somewhere and providing someone with the device and connectivity, they'd much rather send an email blast out to folks with a link to the website and say register this way, and hopefully they'll be able to keep tabs on how many people take advantage of that. That's a lot more cost-effective for them. It's a lot more privacy protective for the individual.
So, okay, one last thing. And your testimony is that there is absolutely no change in the electoral makeup of those who are registering through the online process.
That's what we've seen in the states, that basically online registrants look pretty much statistically exactly like the existing registrants.
So the point I'm trying to get to is, so there is no advantage for either party to use this as a political tool, political game.
I think that's fair to say. If you look at the experience in the other states, this may come as a disappointment to some and a reason to celebrate for others, but it doesn't seem to have any impact. It isn't even necessarily leading to more people on the list. It is mostly transferring inefficient paper transactions to an electronic transaction, which is far more cost-effective and efficient.
Thank you.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you. Thanks for coming today. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I want to make sure that I understand this. So in order for somebody, first of all, I'm in favor of efficiency, and I've asked the LBB to let us know how much money this would save us, and they haven't done that yet, but I'm sure they will. So if I'm going to register online, I'm going to enter generally my driver's license number. I mean, that's the general, or the state issued ID. So therefore, I have to have a driver's license or a state-issued ID.
In most states, that's right.
And in most states, that's a picture ID, right?
It is in most states.
So,
In fact, every state that we've seen that done.
so people that are registering to vote have a picture ID, right?
That's right.
So,
At least online, they still have paper alternatives.
yeah. So if states require them to have a voter ID, picture voter ID, when they go to vote, and they've registered through an online system, it's not much of an argument that people can't have picture IDs, is it, to vote?
For the online registrants in the majority of states that require a link to DMV, and I should say the reason they do that is because they need a signature on the voter file so that they can compare it to absentee ballots, and DMVs have a very robust database of signatures. So they can import that signature from the DMV database. For those who are registering through the online system, by definition, in those states like Arizona, which pioneered this, by definition, those people have a photo ID and a record in the DMV database.
Okay, so the people of the states that are listed on your blue or yellow, which are they either have them or get ready to have them, correct? Do you know how many of those have photo ID requirements for voting, voter ID?
Well, so the answer, I have to count them up right now, but I can tell you just eyeballing it. States like Kansas and Arizona have photo ID requirements. There might be various stages of litigation activity going on around those. South Carolina has a photo ID requirement, but there are other states on this list like California that actually forbids the requirement of photo ID in voting.
But they do require them essentially to have a picture ID in order to register to vote through their online system, because in order to do that, they'd have to have a driver's license or a state-issued ID.
As I said, the majority of states do that. There are states, it is not an absolute requirement if you can get signatures from somewhere or somewhere else. So it's really a state policy choice. Right. What we're seeing is online registration can fit the policy needs of different states. It can fit the policy needs of California, which forbids photo ID. And in fact, if you don't have a DMV record, there's an alternative means of electronic registration for those people. And it fits the needs of Arizona, which has photo ID, which requires citizenship documentation in their DMV as well. So it's really a state policy choice. online voter registration by design is not prescriptive in that sense.
Right, I guess I just don't understand why, if we want to have online voter registration, which I'm in favor of, and the most easiest way to do it is through their driver's license or their state-issued ID, as to why that some of my colleagues have such an issue with people having that same identification to actually vote. That's the thing we're going to have to end up reconciling. I know it's going to end up probably being in the courts, but it seems like to me that most states will require you to have that in order to register. Probably would have you. It seems reasonable to have that to vote as well.
And I just point out very briefly, we're completely neutral on the issue of photo ID, and we don't work on that in any of the states, either
Right.
for or against. Even in the states that have had online voter registration for the longest period of time and has the widest use, there's still a significant portion of those who are registering who are using paper and are not using the
Well, you'd always
DMV
have an
database.
alternative. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, David, for being here today. Can you speak a little bit about proof of citizenship issues? Have there been any issues that come up, or how is it verified? Is it through the driver's license? Any issues with
It really
with that?
depends on what's in the DMV database. So there are states, Arizona is a great example. Arizona has required proof of citizenship for a driver's license since the mid-'90s. So they have very robust citizenship data in their database. Washington has no citizenship data in their database. But what online registration can do, and I think does very, very effectively, is at the very beginning of the process when someone's interacting with the system, it can lay out however you'd like to the requirements. Those requirements are usually I'm 18 or older, I'm a citizen of the United States, and I'm a resident of this state. And some states even require individuals, unlike many paper registration forms, to physically click their mouse on those, affirming each of those checked boxes. And I think that's one of the reasons that that those using online registrations, and again, it's then also being checked against the DMV database, even if there's no citizenship information, that person has still physically presented themselves under the law of their state, demonstrated at the minimum legal presence, and has gotten a DMV record because of that. So the online registration system, it doesn't entirely moot out the citizenship issues, and it can vary by states, but I think it largely moots out any concerns about the citizenship or eligibility of individuals who are registering.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Members, any other questions, Mr. Becker? Thank you for your handouts and your presentation. Great information on what's going on through the other states. And I noticed, and I know that Arizona's been doing this a long time, but they're up to 80% now.
In odd-numbered
voter-
years, it's about 85%. In
85%
even-numbered years,
are
it's closer to 70, because there are more registrants, obviously, in
Right.
even-numbered years. But so they're seeing, and as states who've had it for more and more years, Kansas has had it since 2009. Colorado, I think, had it since 2009. We're starting to see an uptick in how many people are choosing to use this.
Actually done it. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you
so
all.
much.
Good job.
The chair will now call Jacqueline Callan, who is here to testify on charge number 4, online voter registration, neutrally. Hi, Jackie. Good morning. If you'll state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Thanks, Jackie Callanan, Bexar County Elections Administrator, and also the Legislative Chair for the Texas Association of Elections Administrators. And I would just like to take a moment, Madam Chair, to sort of step back and remember we had this in the last session, and we were so close. We were so close. It came out of committee and went on calendars on the 19th of May. So we just ran out of days. We just want to say that we do support it. We supported it then. We would love to be able to work with you on it. And after hearing Mr. Becker's wonderful presentation, I would just like to, I heard it mentioned at one point, but one of the most difficult pieces for the lack of online registration, which means correct information. The voters right now, we see a number in Bexar County that go online, to Texas Online. They don't complete the process. They don't realize when they hit that button that they have to print it, sign it, and send it in. That leaves us with provisional ballots. I heard that mentioned. And they're disenfranchised because they did not complete the process. So this would help tremendously. Those are the hardest ones for us to turn away after an election. And because they did everything right, they went there, and so many transactions are online now. This would just please help us one more step. That's all I have.
Jackie, what other advantages do you see? I mean, as far as registering that this would do of all of those. I mean, especially you're in special case because you're in Bear County. Are there any other pluses that you see?
Again, it would, if you could, I remember when I was here last time, I brought the box of shame on us for the military.
Right, yes. And that was kind of what I was alluding to.
Yes, and if we do this again, we will gladly do that again so that you can see some of the conditions of the cards that we get.
Right.
And, you know, we can't decipher. So then we send a confirmation card and hope it's the right address, and it comes back. And again, these people are sure that they registered, but the process has not been complete because we've got that 10-day confirmation period. But yes, I would be glad to share and pull some cards to do another shame on us box.
Okay. Members, any questions? Jackie, did you have? Representative Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, just real quickly, this, I think you're probably the wrong person to ask this. So would having an online process, it would help the shame on us box?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Really cut down on the number, if military are trying to register overseas, or whatever they're trying to do. I think maybe the Secretary of State's office would be better to answer this question.
Yes, but they would be able to update their records when they were back in state by doing that, because it isn't just an online, it's actually doing the updates for us too.
Great, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Jackie, okay. Thank you for being here today. The Chair will now recognize Sandra Haltom, who is representing the Democratic National Committee now, who is here neutrally on the, if you'll just state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Hello, Sandra Haltom, Democratic National Committee. Not to reiterate all of the things that have already been discussed, David made a great presentation about all of the wonderful benefits of online registration. Still in favor of it for all the same reasons as last session, and as Jackie mentioned, we got very close on this last session. Hopefully we can get a bill introduced and moving through the process and get everyone's questions answered and all the details hashed out more quickly this time and get this done, because it saves money, it increases security, it has so many benefits and no downfalls that I'm aware of. Representative Click mentioned the issue of identity theft, and one of the things that a voter has actually mentioned to me is that she was just absolutely terrified at the thought of sending in a mail-in registration application, because it's basically just a piece of paper you fold it over that has your driver's license, your name, your address, your driver's license number, and the last 4 digits of your social, that's clearly, evidently, obviously marked as being a voter registration application on the outside. And think of how many human beings handle that piece of paper between the time it leaves the voter's hands and gets in the mail and the time it's actually delivered to the elections office. She has every reason to be concerned that at some point someone's going to take it and open it and collect that information and potentially steal her identity. And with online registration, you remove the number of human beings between the voter's application and them getting on the list. And that in itself reduces error and increases the level of security if the voter has more control over what's going on to that list. And it's less people between them and the list. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Members, any questions of Sandra that you have this morning? Thank you. Okay. Chair will now recognize Donald Lee, who is here to testify from the Texas Conference of Urban Counties. If you'll state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Donald Lee, Executive Director of the Texas Conference of Urban Counties. We are 37 counties with more populous counties in the state of Texas. Our policy is set by a 20-member policy committee elected by the membership at our commissioners' courts. And that policy committee has examined and looked at this issue and would offer their support of Texas implementing an online voter registration system, seeing it mainly as an efficiency issue that will be good for taxpayers. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Members, any questions of Donald this morning? Representative Wood.
Would you, thank you, Madam Chair, would you be able to say what is the anticipated savings for the counties?
I don't have that number. I understand from the previous testimony that the LBB may be asked to look at this, and they'll call our counties and gather information on that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Members, any other questions of Donald this morning?
Thank you
for being here. The chair will now recognize Glenn Maxey, who is here with the Texas Democratic Party. If you'll state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
My name is Glenn Maxey, Texas Democratic Party. Without reiterating previous testimony, I just want to make a couple comments. Having run voter registration programs that are all focused at the last minute, I run the programs in Travis County where we've had 50 locations around town where people can come and register to vote. We do our public service announcements. People come in. We register 25,000 people in a single day, and that's 30 days before an election. In a presidential year, we often start early voting without voter registration rolls being completed, or if they're completed, the clerk might get the list the night before early vote starts, but the voter still doesn't have a voter registration card in their hands because they haven't been mailed out yet. I think that having online voter registration changes that whole, it may not change who registers, but it at least makes it more efficient, makes that stuff happen quicker, and people get on the rolls right before an election more accurately. It changes our whole process of making sure that we chase down people who are inaccurately registered. If you have that voter, as Ms. Callahan said, who leaves off the apartment number or leaves off some data item, there is no picking up the phone by a voter registrar and calling in saying, hey, you left off an apartment number, what is your apartment number? The law requires them to mail a letter. And since there's so many people registering at the last minute, that letter is going to get to that voter typically in a few days. By the time they respond to that letter, it gets back to the clerk. That voter might be disenfranchised because the time frame has run out. So we wholeheartedly support this. We think for the cost, the efficiency, and just to make it easier for us to update. I would expect that in the voter registration that I've done, especially in an urban county where there are a lot of renters and a lot of students in Travis County, that when we do that 25,000 registered voters on the last day, that overwhelmingly those are not new voters. Those are people just changing address. An online system would do a lot to just make sure that updating of registration happens more efficiently. And lastly, if you would like to take a minute to go to one of the online systems, I'd use the California system. I acted like I was a Californian, filled out all the data, of course skipped over my California driver's license because I didn't have one, but I wanted to see how it sort of worked. It does give the prompts that if you leave an apartment number off, it will say, that address must have an apartment number, so it gives those kind of prompts. But it also does some other things. Now that we have an annual mail ballot, in California they have mail ballots on demand. Anybody can vote by mail. So it also asks the question, do you want to vote by mail? It asks the question, what language do you want your ballot to be in? So other voting processes have been brought into this. Our situation of having somebody who gets an annual mail ballot and then moves from home into assisted living. They need to change their address. In an online system, you could build into it that they change their address and update your mail ballot all in the same application. I think that those benefits also accrue to the benefit of our voters. Thank
Members, any questions? Mr. Maxey, that you have at this time? Thank you, Glenn. And also like to recognize our Vice Chair Miles is here. Welcome. The chair will now recognize Skipper Wallace, who is here from the Texas Republican Chairman's Association, to come testify. If you'll state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
My name is Skipper Wallace. I'm the state legislature chairman for the Republican County Chairman's Association. I'm glad to see all of you here today. I hope all your elections came out to your satisfaction and you're ready to go again. I have been an election official and a voter registrar for over 20 years, and I guess I've seen all kinds of situations where somebody would try to register or they would give me a registration application filled out, and I try to read it, and I have to give it back to them a blank when I say, why don't you try again? I can't read this one. And this would be one of the things that certainly would be improved by an online system. I understand that it's supposed to save money. I hope those things are documented and prove out, because I'm always for saving money. I think we need to be cost effective as we possibly can in running our elections. I know it'd be faster because it takes me 2 or 3 days to get those filled out registration forms down to the elections office, where this would be instantaneous. However, there's always the devil's in the details, and I've got to look at the whole picture before I put my support or our organization's support behind this idea. And I think one of the problems that's been pointed out to me by a couple of election officials that I work with is no original signature. And I think I'm going to speak a little later on about tying this stuff into the DMV database where there is an original signature on the DMV record. If we can do that, which I know we're in the process of trying to do that here in Texas, but we need to move forward with all that. I had an opportunity to have lunch with the ex-director of the CIA back a couple of years ago when I was on the LCRA board, and he told me a story that just kind of curled my hair. My hair's already curly, but more so. And I asked him, I said, I know you can't tell me any secrets and stuff, but just tell me where we're the most vulnerable. And he said, well, he says, we hire the best hackers in the world, and we are trying to hack into every system around the world to try to see what they're doing. They do the same thing. China's got some of the best hackers in the world working on trying to get into our systems. Evidently, we've got some here in the United States trying to get into our own systems. I just think when you've got presidential elections or even, state representative elections, millions or billions of dollars involved, you're going to have the best hackers in the world trying to subvert whatever system that you put online. You're opening the door and saying, come on, guys, see if you can do something with this. And I think before the County Chairman's Association would get in wholehearted support with this, you've got to show me how you're going to implement this and what the safeguards are that you want to put with it to make sure that it's going to be non-hackable if there is such a thing. I think that there are a few things that we need to do, and we need to improve our existing voter rolls before we go in doing online voter registration. We need to cooperate with all the in-state agencies that we have that have data that would be useful to us in verifying voters, which I know Keith and his group are working on doing some of that. We have not been in the elections department allowed by the legislature yet to involve ourselves outside the state of Texas in sharing information. I think we need to expedite that process as quickly as we possibly can to ferret out any bad information or fictitious information or whatever. I think that we need to develop the technology, and one of the suggestions, and by the way, if you haven't read this report, which is on the Presidential Commission on Election Administration, it's a response by the Republican Lawyers Association. You need to get a copy of this. It's online. It has some really good information on this. I thought the Prue guys were going to bring you a copy this morning, but I didn't bring you a copy, or I would have. Anyway, it has some really good information that you would be interested in, particularly if you're going to serve on our elections committee in the next session, because this is where these ideas are going to come from to get to the legislature to make laws. One of the ideas that they proposed in here was to develop technology to display the photos on the electronic poll books. I think that's a fantastic idea. And then you could compare your driver's license with the poll book. Man, all right. We need to utilize systems like Crosscheck and ERIC, which are two systems that are developed and are used nationwide that are used by many of these states that the Proof folks brought their lists of to update their data and make them more credible. We've got to maintain the final decision on a voter application with a voter official, an election official. No automatic registration. You fill it out and it's automatic. No. We don't want to do that. We want to have an election official take that information, whether it comes in paper or electronic, and make that final decision. Yes, this is a legitimate application, or this isn't. I think that's something we've got to maintain. We got to have a good signature somehow through DMV, or I don't know how else we're going to do it, because I've seen electronic signatures, and I guarantee you I've never seen an electronic signature that would anywhere compare to an original handwritten signature. I think that we of course have to put adequate safeguards for cyber attacks. I think the legislature basically considers voting and all a second-class citizen until we get to the process of voting, and then everybody gets in a panic. Oh, we got to do something. The legislature needs to take voting and the voting process very seriously and look at it just like everything else in the state budget, and we've got to put some money to correct these problems so we can have the best elections that we can possibly have. I polled my county chairs across the state of Texas as to what their opinion was, because I told them I was going to come to this hearing and I needed a little feedback from them as to what they thought. Well, I had a few that said, well, sounds like a good idea. Had a few said, yeah, man, go for it. And then I had about 95% of them said, ain't no way. And I'm sure a lot of that is because of lack of information, because I learned a whole lot from this report, and I have a lot better attitude about it now than I did before I read this report. I think a lot of them are very apprehensive that they have heard and it's been intimated that online voter registration is the first step toward same-day voting. You register here in this column, and then you move over to this column and you vote. I happened to work for the president down in Florida when they were doing that, and I thought, my God, this is such a mess. I can't believe this. But that's the way they choose to do it. We're not Florida. We're Texas. I really think that we probably can do a good job if we can get the legislature to take elections serious, to provide the resources to get our voter rolls spiffed up, and to coordinate our information with some of these other states through either these different systems, or do it on our own, whatever. But there are ways to do it to make it much safer. I just think before the County Chairman's Association is willing to say we're in support of this, we're going to have to see the details. How are we going to do it? How are we going to implement it? How are we going to make it safe? What are the little nitty-gritty things that either make it a good program or a bad program? I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Skipper, Representative Wood.
Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Skipper, I was going to engage with you a very lengthy and drawn-out debate about the scenario of Russian hackers hacking our election system when they could have hacked credit card companies, power plants, and anything else. But you know what? I'm not going to go there.
What? Why not? Go ahead.
Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
You know the state and counties carry a lot of our personal information.
Yes, sir.
Driver's license information, medical records, tax assessments, home values, court records. The state legislature has all of our bills and our legislation online. All those are accessible online.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you be satisfied if the protocols to protect the voter registration process was the same as that we use for all of the other state processes to secure all the other state data?
Well, I've got to tell you the truth. I don't know what the security issues are with those, or what they do, what they use at the present time to make those things secure.
Okay.
I think I would very much like to learn what they are and see that those same things are used to make this secure. And if we can make it a secure process, then I think, yeah, we could probably support it.
I mean, I assume you're not an internet security expert.
I am not.
Okay.
In
If-
fact,
if
I'm
we had the
barely
Secretary-
literate on computers.
If we have the Secretary of State come up here and we have somebody from the governor's office say, like, this is the process that we use, this is the process that all state agencies use, this is the process that all counties use, it's been secure for this long, no one's ever hacked it, this is a secure system, we fix problems when they pop up, would you be satisfied?
Well, I heard the statement a while ago that there have been no issues of voter fraud in any of these states that have used online system. I think that's very naive. I think maybe they just probably haven't found it out yet. But that's my basic paranoia, I guess, of elections, and knowing that there are people trying to, and on both sides, not just Republicans or Democrats, but there are a lot of folks trying to subvert the system to their own advantage. And I just think we need to be cognizant of these and try to make our system as secure as possible.
That's fair. All right. In terms of looking at the exact details of the program, and you understand that the testimony earlier was that, about 17 other states already do this? I'm sorry.
I spent about an hour yesterday on
19 other states already do this?
with the Prove group.
Would you, I mean, if the committee...
Just because 19 other states do it doesn't mean that it's good for Texas. We stand alone. We do what's good for us, not what's good for Arizona or Timbuktu.
If we look at the other states, if the committee as a whole got together, we looked at other states, looked at what they did, we took their best practices and implemented it into our legislation, and took the best of what they have and implemented it in our system, would that be satisfactory?
I would certainly seriously look at it and evaluate it and come back with an answer.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Well, and I think, where Skipper's going to, I understand, because if you look at how each state did it differently,
Right.
some internally, some used outside systems, and some did legislation, some didn't. And so I think we have to come up with our own formula and look at what worked and what didn't work and how we would proceed on with this.
I think it's got some great aspects to
Right.
it.
There's some
It's
great
just-
things, and then I think the other thing, as you pointed out too, and has been pointed out before, I think we would definitely still want to have each application approved, which 9 of the states actually do that. They still go to their Secretary of States or a particular place. Just because you're registered doesn't mean that it's just automatic. It has to be
Right.
approved and matched up and make sure everything is done. We do have a couple more witnesses for technical stuff that you can ask these specific questions.
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
My concern is that I'm afraid we're going to spend another session trying to reinvent the wheel.
I think we've moved down the road a long way. I really do. I think there's been a lot of information during the last 12 months, and we've seen what other states have done, and I think it's a matter of taking, as you said, taking those best things and putting something together, and then going through the way our state, because every state works differently with their elections and who's in charge of it, and we're going to talk to the Secretary of State's office in just a minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for sponsoring the bill,
Sure,
co-sponsoring the
absolutely.
bill last time.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
And I would
Thank you,
strongly
Skipper.
suggest that y'all
Yes,
get a
and tell
copy
me
of this
again, I
report.
want exactly what it's called so we can, and we'll make sure that we get copies. We'll get copies to all of us. Thanks, Skipper. Okay, the chair will now call Tony Rodriguez, who is here with Texas Department of Public Safety as a resource witness. If you'll just state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Tony Rodriguez. I'm with the Texas Department of Public Safety.
And members, do you have anything you want to share with us, or do you just want to have members ask questions about as far as how the driver's license program and all works as far as security?
Ma'am, I'm here to discuss election identification certificates.
Oh, okay.
Miles's office asked.
Okay.
My office? Yes. Yours was at the building yesterday.
Sorry, I just got blank.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Do you want us to bring the other witnesses up first? And I'm sorry. What we're going to do is, I think what we'll do is let the other witnesses come up on this one, and then bring you up after that.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. The chair will now call Todd Kimbrell from Department of Information Resources and come up, and if you'll state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and committee members. My name is Todd Kimbrell. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the Texas Department of Information Resources. We have submitted written testimony on this interim charge, and you have that. I'm not going to read that. I'll characterize it as two different components of that testimony. One references the National Conference on State Legislatures, which provides we provide a URL in that testimony. Excuse me. That provides an excellent recap of the status of all the other states, very consistent with what Mr. Becker presented earlier today. The second part of that testimony really talks about Texas.gov and the capabilities of our state portal. Today, we do not process online voter forms for registration purposes. It was discussed earlier that there is an online capability there. There, in fact, are many online capabilities for people to fill out a form online, print that form, and mail it in. Today in Texas.gov, we do handle a change of address process for voter registration. It's not a new registration, but a voter can go online onto Texas.gov and complete a change of address process. That process, because there's concern about security and whatnot, that process does leverage encrypted communication to the Department of Public Safety, who holds all of the 4 state certificate numbers that are used to verify that a person is appropriate and not fraudulent. The 4 different forms that DPS manages in this process are a driver's license, concealed handgun license, which also is applied for online through Texas.gov, voter certificate, and a personal ID. Those are the 4 state-issued IDs that DPS is responsible for. We do leverage any one of those 4 to confirm in order to submit a change of address electronic record to the Secretary of State for processing. With that, I will answer any questions that the committee may have.
Members, Representative Click.
On the change of address for a voter, is there a mailed letter verifying with the voter that they in fact did request that change to be made?
I believe that the Secretary of State issues that letter. We capture that information on Texas.gov and we submit that electronically to Secretary of State, who then processes that out to the counties. So I do believe that that does correlate into a notice, a mail notice.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Mr. Kimbrell? No. Thank you very much. Thank you for your written information also.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. We'll get a Secretary of State, and then we can bring them back up later.
Okay. All right. The chair will now recognize Keith Ingram with the Secretary of State's office. If you'll state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Keith Ingram, Texas Secretary of State Elections Division. As DIR just said, we do currently do change of address within a county. So if someone moves within a county, they can change their address online. People can also update their other information. They can change their name and do other kinds of updates online. And when that happens, the user must input their Texas driver's license, personal ID card, concealed carry number. and their date of birth, the last 4 digits of their Social Security number, as well as the audit number found on the driver's license or personal ID card. And they also have to put in their voter unique identification number, so they got to put in their voter number. And then they can log in and update their information. So we have an online process now for voters to update their information as well as to do address changes within a county. And we would envision, if the legislature was interested in doing online voter registration, that we would do a similar process for new registrations. With regard to the number of new registrations, Texas has had, from the 5 years from 2008 to 2012 inclusive, we had 2.7 million new voter registrations that were outside of the DPS system. And I say outside of the DPS system because we get registrations from the Department of Public Safety electronically already. So what we're talking about for paper applications in the 5 years from 08 to 12 was 2.7 million. So that's how many, that's the universe of applications that we're dealing with. And we don't know what the multiplier is on the potential cost savings. You know, Arizona estimates that it's 80 cents a registration. California says it's $2.34. Colorado says it's about $1. So, you know, if it's 2.7 million in 5 years and half of the folks use the online system instead of paper, then you can multiply it by whichever one of those cost savings factors, and that would be the cost savings.
So Keith, let me understand. So basically, when someone comes to get a driver's license, they're asked if they want to register to vote.
That's right.
So basically, they're registering online to be a voter.
They are, and the signature that DPS captures that's on your driver's license,
then is your signature.
That's your voter registration signature, and so DPS is already transferring the images of those signatures to us and from us to the counties. That process is in place now.
So basically, about, what are you saying, half?
In 2013, there were 655,000 new registrations. 655,000 of those, 458,000 came from DPS.
Okay, so 2/3 of our registrations are already coming from DPS online.
You know, and in a presidential year, we get a lot more. In 2012, there was 1.1 million registrations, and only 318,000 came through DPS. So that was a lot more.
A lot more paper during the presidential.
That's right.
Okay.
I did talk to Judd Choate. He's the director of the Elections Division in Colorado. I put the information in the written testimony. But he says that in their voter registration rolls in Colorado, they register by party. And for their total voter registration, there's a 15,000 difference between party registrations. So they're virtually 50-50 state. And in the 4 years from 2010 to 2014 that they did online voter registration, you know, just a straight 4-year sample, there was 5,000 disparity between the Republican and Democratic registrations using the online system. So it exactly matched their existing voter rolls. The average age using their voter registration system was 41. The average age of the registered voters in Colorado is 48. And then it was 51% of the people who registered online were female, and 51% of the registered voters are female. So it was demographically identical. You know, the main benefit is for mobile populations, and like Representative Wu was alluding to, the military and overseas population is extremely mobile. So the benefit to being able to update your information in real time online instead of sending in paper forms would be a benefit to mobile populations such as the military. It would save money, it would save time, and when I'm talking about time, it's time to get the pile of registrations inputted, and to get them, since the post office took away our postal exemption, so now then we have to have addresses on the voter registration applications, you know, the whole address with the barcode. And whenever we do for statewide Chapter 20 agencies, Department of Health and Human Services, all of those registrations have the Secretary of State's address on them. So people mail those applications in, they come to our office. We get about 25,000 a month that we have to sort out into counties and then mail them to the counties. And so all of that takes time, and the online voter registration would save that time. And then, of course, better accuracy. The concerns we all know are security and cost. and we just have to, if y'all are interested in doing a system like this, we'd have to make sure that we have measures in place to keep the initial costs down and to come up with a technological system that would work and be secure. So that's all.
Do you have any idea what cost would be, or it just depends on what type of system would be recommended to be used?
Exactly. We've done cost estimates with fiscal notes on different online voter registration bills over the years, and they've varied in amounts from nothing to more than $1 million, depending on how the bill is worded. So I don't know.
Just depends on what type of system.
That's right.
Okay. Members, any questions? Representative Click.
The question that I'd asked the man from DPS was, we can already change addresses online.
Right.
Does SOS or the county send out a letter following up to confirm that was in fact authorized?
What'll happen is there will be a voter registration certificate sent to the updated address. What I don't know, and I don't think we do, is send a letter to the old address. I don't think that happens now. Ordinarily, if you change your address on a credit card or something, you'll get your credit card at the new address, and you'll get a letter to the old address saying you updated your address. I don't think we do that second thing.
Members, any other questions? Representative Williams.
Hey Keith, just real quickly, do you feel confident that you, if tasked to, you guys could implement a system that was secure?
Yes, we've got people's personal information now inside the voter registration database, and security is something that we are very much aware of in our office, and we had a security audit done by an independent auditor just a couple of years ago, and they had some recommendations for us to improve security. In addition, Department of Information Resources does annual audits as well as secret sneak attacks to try to see if you've got a secure system, and if they identify any deficiencies, they let us know as well.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions that you have? Okay. Thanks, Keith.
Thank y'all.
We also have Roe Jackson from Secretary of State's office that doesn't plan on testifying unless somebody needs him for something to come up. Thank you all. Are you ready for the video?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Recall Tony Rodriguez.
Okay, the chair will now recall Tony Rodriguez from Texas Department of Safety. If you'll come and state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Tony Rodriguez from the Texas Department of Public Safety.
Okay, Vice Chair Miles, you have some questions?
Mr. Rodriguez, let me apologize for that debacle a few minutes ago. Members, let me apologize to you as well. Just a couple of quick questions. There was a statewide budget to roll this program out, the voter ID program, and we were spending state money to educate and make people aware of the new system. Is that correct? For the IDs?
Sir, I'm unaware of the budget. I was on the operations side of the elections.
I'll hold that for the Secretary. One other question for you. People were being fingerprinted for voter IDs. Is that correct? Do you know of any people that are being fingerprinted for any voter IDs?
Our current system does not allow fingerprints to be taken. It skips directly past that. That's not an option that was offered.
Do you know of any
Originally,
cases?
there was a mistake, and there were a small number that were fingerprinted, sir.
Do we know what happened to those fingerprints on that mistake?
Sir, I do not know.
Do you know of any cases where elderly people were sent back and forth and had to come back repeatedly for little knick-knack items that were not filled out on the application properly? Are you aware of any?
No, sir, I'm not.
Do you have any idea how many of those IDs you've given out so far?
Yes, sir. We have issued 266.
266 statewide?
Yes, sir.
In your opinion, is that a high number or a low number?
Sir,
I
have no opinion. I know that we've issued 266.
When we budgeted for that, when we rolled this bill out, was there an estimated number of how many we thought we would be doing?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
To your knowledge, but we've got 200, how many today?
Sir, 266.
Statewide?
Yes, sir.
That's all I have right now. And I apologize. I was caught off guard on that one. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you verify for me when a person registers for their driver's license, do they have to prove citizenship?
That's part of the current process, sir.
Members, any other questions? Anyone has? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez.
We also have Margaret Spinks from DPS, if she wants to testify. If not, there's been more than any other questions.
Okay, where's her? Members, we also have Margaret Spinks from DPS who is here also. If you have questions that you would like to ask her on any of the voter registration questions. Anyone like to bring up Margaret? Go ahead.
I'm Margaret Spinks, the manager of License and Record Service, and I'm here as a resource.
Okay. Members, Margaret's here for any questions that you have from DPS as far as registering and voters. Have anything to ask her? Anything, Margaret, that you want to share with us, or just here for a resource?
I'm just here as a resource.
Okay, thank you for being here with us. So. Is that it? Members, that's all the witnesses we have to testify on Interim Charge 4. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on Interim Charge 4 that we do not have? All right. Then, hearing none, we'll move on to the next Interim Charge, Interim Charge 5. And Interim Charge 5 is on presidential primaries, and it is basically to review the study by the Secretary of State required by House Bill 3103 in the 83rd regular session regarding moving the date of the Texas presidential primary election and making appropriate recommendations for that. And so the first person that we'll call, the chair will now recognize Jacqueline Callan, who is here to testify from Texas Association of Election Administrators. If you'll just state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jackie Callanan, Bexar County Elections Administrator, and also the Legislative Chair for the Texas Association of Elections Administrators. And we humbly ask that we do look at this. And I know the Secretary of State's office is looking at that presidential primary. We are standing here today in front of you in this even year, just exhausted because we have the spring elections on May 10th. We have these on May 27th. The March primary worked wonderfully. I mean, that's exactly, that was wonderful. We have the MOVE Act that we've instituted, which has pushed the primary runoff. Down here, it's the May elections. It's that May spring elections. If we could, again, ask just as the calendar be moved, and we talk to TASB or we talk to TML to move that back a couple weeks. The confusion for the voters is what drives us. Yes, we can say we're exhausted, but we do it for elections. But this time, with the annual mail ballots, which are fantastic, we were sending ballots out for the May 10th election and for the May 27th election. And there was a myriad of confusion. We received party ballots back in the May 10th envelopes when those early ballot boards opened them. We know when we open these this Saturday that we'll find May 10th ballots in there. And so again, we disenfranchised these voters. And that's at the heart of all of this. The voters themselves were confused. The voters themselves came to the May 10th election, came in to process in person, got to the booths and said,
not the names.
Not the names.
Right.
Not the names. So I'm not going to vote. And so we literally canceled them and they left. So again, that's where the relief has to come. We have got to assist those voters, both in being able to have those 2 mail ballots stretched out so that they do understand this is a separate election, because we did run into that. And this was really the first time that we had that much confusion. So we do ask that you look at this. Thank you.
Members, any questions of Jackie? Does anyone have?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you for being here. The chair will now recognize Glenn Maxey, who is here with Texas Democrat Party. If you state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Glenn Maxey with the Texas Democratic Party. I wanted just to give a brief overview from the political side of changing presidential primaries in state law in Texas. Both the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee are in the process of adopting their 2016 election schedule for nominating their presidents. I think the Republicans have completed theirs. The Democrats will complete theirs in August of setting our rules for engagement for 2016. Both parties have agreed that we will have first 4 presidential contests in the first 4 early states on the same dates. In 2016, both the Republicans and Democrats were adopting rules for the Iowa caucus to be on February the 1st, the New Hampshire primary on Tuesday, February the 9th, the Nevada caucuses on Saturday, February 20th, and the South Carolina primary on Saturday, February 27th. In both party rules, it states that no party can have any contest other than these 4 states before March 1st of that year. Fortuitously, our primary in Texas is on March 1st. So we are under party rules. We are both parties are set at the earliest date possible in order to meet party rules. Now, the argument for moving our primary early is to have more influence. Well, here's the kicker. If we were to move our primary to February 1st to have more influence, all 4 of those states then move forward in front of us. So there is no way to leapfrog any further into the calendar because the first 4 states move forward, just like happened in 2008, where Michigan and Florida tried to go early, and that meant that Iowa and New Hampshire moved into January, and at one point we thought that we were going to have those contests in December. So there is no way to jump the line. Secondly, if Texas moves to a date inside the window of those 4 states, the punishment from the state parties is this. From the national parties. The Democrats will cut our delegates numbers from, we have approximately 280 delegates. Ours get cut in half, and no members of the Democratic National Committee get to attend their convention. If the Republicans move into the window before March 1st, they get to have, the Texas Republican Party gets to send 12 delegates. 12, that's it, to the National Convention, and there are Republican National Committeemen and chair cannot attend. So there is a heavy penalty. So there is no way to game this system for us to go earlier, to get any kind of advantage, and we're on the earliest date possible. So it's not broke. There's no reason to fix it.
Members, any questions? Mr. Maxey? Thank you. The chair will now recognize Keith Ingram from Secretary of State's office. Just state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Keith Ingram, Texas Secretary of State's Office, Elections Division. We are in the middle of preparing our report specified by House Bill 3103, and as directed by the bill, we will consult with all primary holding parties in order to complete the report. We will also look at all the laws that will be affected and how they would need to be amended and what effect those amendments might have. We'll have that report to you all well before the session starts.
Members, any questions of Keith? Nothing to report at this time. Can't do it. Thank you.
Does my wonderful and eager staff ask for any more witnesses I need to know about?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's it.
We're on the next one.
Okay, members, that's all the witnesses that we have to testify on interim charge 5. Is there anyone else that wishes to testify that we do not have signed up? All right, then we'll move on. Hearing no one else, we will move on to Interim Charge 6. And what Interim Charge 6 is, it's to conduct legislative oversight and monitoring of the agencies and programs under the committee's jurisdiction and implementation of relevant legislation passed by the 83rd Legislature and conducting the oversight the committee should. And if you look down through, it's looking at any reforms, state agencies, or anything for streamlining or helping any of these agencies underneath us, and so for our jurisdiction. So we're going to move on to that oversight and monitoring. And sorry, I wanted to pull it. Okay, sorry, have a little technical difficulty. The chair will now recognize Sandra Haltom, who is here to testify on charge number 6 from the DNC. If you'll just state your name and herewith for the record, please.
Madam Chair, before she does
Yes, certainly.
I'm sorry, I'm a little simple guy. Can you tell me what all that just meant?
Basically,
I'm sure I'm not the only member that wants to ask that question.
Right, it's a catch-all. I mean, basically every committee has oversight over certain agencies underneath them, and so this is basically if there's anything that they have or anything that we want to talk to them about of any efficiencies or things that they have or someone else for any of those agencies. It's a catch-all that each committee has, basically.
Okay, y'all are welcome.
So
I asked the question, so y'all are welcome.
Any discussion that you want to have that there's anything you would like to offer or ask about efficiencies. Right.
We were all looking at each other like, what?
What are you talking about? Sandra.
Sandra Haltom, Democratic National Committee, and I don't have a lot of things to say. I was really hoping there would be more people here from the agencies y'all oversee who do things related to elections, who would be able to answer a lot of questions, and I'd get to know what the answers to those questions were, because I do have some. I don't know if there's anyone here from the Bureau of Vital Statistics. I'd be curious to see, as far as voter ID, how many reduced price birth certificates they've issued to folks who are needing that in order to get one of the election identification certificates, because that's something that was passed, was that they would allow for certain individuals who needed one to get a reduced price birth certificate in order to get an election identification certificate in order to be able to vote. I'm curious how that's going. I'd honestly like to know more from DPS about how the process of issuing election identification certificates is going, perhaps in some more detail. We know how many have been issued. However, there seem to have been, at least anecdotally in the newspaper, there have been instances, and I've talked to several people, particularly elderly people, who have made multiple trips to DPS and tried to apply for an election identification certificate and been told they did not have proper documentation. I'd like to know if there's any accounting of how many people that is. I mean, I know of individual anecdotes, but I'd like some data to find out, have I heard from everyone in the state who's having this problem, or is this more widespread? I don't know. So I, like you, have questions, but you get to ask them.
Madam Chair.
Invest your mouth.
So, Sandra, I'm going to assume that you were the one that gave my staff those questions.
I know that I spoke with Rob in your office about the fingerprinting question because I was curious, because I do know of at least one individual who had her fingerprints taken when she got an EIC, and a representative of DPS at another event had at some point mentioned that some people were fingerprinted getting EICs before they realized they shouldn't be doing that, and they halted that process. Right. My question is then, how many people were in fact fingerprinted getting EICs, and what happened to those fingerprints? No one seems to know.
Yeah. Good question.
No one seems to know the answer to this
I
question.
appreciate you working with my office, but they should have informed me before I stepped out here and made a fool of myself.
Yeah, this is what that question was about.
And there were some other issues about elderly having to come back and forth. Was it?
Yes, there have been several instances that I'm aware of. There could be more, who knows, of individuals, particularly elderly women, making multiple trips to DPS to get an election identification certificate. The most recent example in the last few days is a woman from Waco who is 92 years old and wants to vote because she's voted in every election her whole entire life, wants to vote at the polls because that's what she has always done. She doesn't want to vote by mail. She doesn't trust the vote by mail system. She wants to go vote at the polls. And she got together her Social Security card, her Medicare card, some other documents, and went down to DPS and applied for an election identification certificate, but was rejected because she doesn't have a birth certificate. She doesn't have a birth certificate because one doesn't exist. She was born in Tennessee by a midwife in a rural area of Tennessee. No birth certificate exists for her to have. So, because a birth certificate is one of the few documents that is required by DPS to get an EIC because it's proof of citizenship, you need proof of citizenship and you need 2 documents proving your identity in most cases. So they rejected her because she didn't have the proof of citizenship in the form of the birth certificate because the birth certificate doesn't exist. So she called the local newspaper and made a big fuss about it, and the local newspaper printed a story about the woman, Ruby Butler, who can't get an identification certificate because she doesn't have a birth certificate. Lo and behold, yesterday, DPS called her son in the morning and said, "Come on down, we'll issue you an EIC." And what they did was, they looked her up in census records, found a record of her with the birth date she has on her other documents, and said, "Good enough, here's an EIC." And that's great, and I'm glad that Ruby now has an EIC, but that's contrary to the protocols, the rules, the laws of what is supposed to be required to get this document. So I'm curious as to what does one actually need to bring to DPS to get an EIC, because it doesn't seem to be consistent with what's published. So I have questions. If you have questions for me,
Well, I think, in this case, and I mean, you're raising a question that can be looked into, and that's what this is for, is basically other questions, but I was not aware of that to me, so.
Do we have the Texas Ethics Commission here?
Yes. Yeah. We do.
I'm going to assume, Madam Chair and Sandra, that these were isolated incidents and we haven't seen repeated, systematic of these kind of problems.
There have actually been more than that. There have been at least 2 others I can think of off the top of my head where an elderly woman, usually it's always an elderly woman, I think because women outlive men, probably. It's always an elderly woman, goes to, usually their daughter, but in this case the son, child takes them down to DPS to get an ID, brings all the documents they have. Mom doesn't have some sort of allegedly necessary document, either a birth certificate or, in a couple of cases, it's been a marriage license to prove the name change between their birth certificate and their other documents they have now, because if they got married and changed their name, you have to present proof of the name change. So you have to show that Mary Smith on the birth certificate is Mary Jones on your Social Security card because you changed your name and you got married. So you have to bring all these things down. We have these women who don't have these documents because they either, born to a midwife in a rural area, don't have their marriage license because it was 50 years ago and the county and the state where they were married has lost it. All of these sorts of instances, they go to the media, they talk to their local newspaper, television station, news story is printed or on the news television station. DPS then tells them, come on down and we'll figure out how to get you an EIC. So apparently the way you get an EIC in this state is to talk to the news media.
Okay. This may be a question for my brother with the Secretary's office. Do we know where all these complaints are being filed? Is there one central place where all these complaints are being filed in these incidents?
It's typically rural areas, the ones that I'm aware of. There may be others. I don't know, like talk to DPS.
Okay. Can we?
Yeah, we're going to bring him up in just 1 second. He's on our list to bring back.
And the ones that I'm aware of are in rural parts of the state.
I'm done.
Members, any other questions of Sandra? Okay, Sandra, we'll check with Keith and see kind of what's coming through and actually if complaints are being filed and that type of thing and see what's happening. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Glenn's next. Okay, the chair will now recognize Glenn Maxey from the Texas Democratic Party. If you'll come and state your name and herewith for the record.
Glenn Maxey with the Texas Democratic Party. I only have one issue that I just want to put on the plate. I talked to several of you individually at the last hearing. As you might know, I now work at the Texas Democratic Party, assisting our party across the state. This is the first time after my long history of activism and working with elections and candidates and being a candidate and a legislator myself, the first time I've actually watched the mechanics of how we run primaries in this state up close and personal. And what I have discovered, I think, is horrifying. It is inefficient. There are problems all over the state of how the state funds primaries out to volunteers. Volunteers are in control of money that they have to pay election bills with. Bills don't get paid on time. Bills don't get paid at all. Money is used inappropriately. I know, watching what happened on the Democratic side, that there were a lot of problems, and I can't imagine that there's just as many on the Republican side across the state. So after we finish this primary season, I'm going to be working hopefully with the Republican Party. I haven't knocked on their door yet. Sit down and try to figure out some rational ways to guarantee that there is a primary in every county. We go into 2016, where there'll be a presidential primary on both the Democratic and Republican side. There were not Democratic primaries in a number of counties. There were not Republican primaries in a number of counties. And in effect, because the lack of having a county chair, a volunteer, people are disenfranchised from participating in party primaries in this state. We should, in my opinion, have professionals. The election administrators or the clerks should be running the primaries in every county, with the parties doing the political side of it, of qualifying candidates, finding election judges, election clerks. But the printing of a ballot should never be left to a volunteer. The fact that in our case, we found $56,000 worth of unpaid ballots from 2012 that we found out right before the primary, that we had to scramble with the Secretary of State and with county chairs to find out why those bills didn't get paid in 2012, because we couldn't run a 2014 primary without those bills paid. And I know I've heard some of the same stories from the Republican side. So this is not just a problem that we have. So I hope that over the late summer and into the fall, we can work with some of y'all and try to come to consensus about how we run primaries in the state, because it is not working.
Members, any questions, comments? Thanks, Glenn. The chair will now recognize Keith Ingram from the Texas Secretary of State's office. State your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Keith Ingram, Texas Secretary of State, Elections Division.
Members, any questions or any?
Yes, ma'am.
Bust your mouth.
Brother Keith, help me understand something.
Sure.
These complaints that we've been tossed around for the last couple of minutes, is there one database they all go into, and where does the person go to file a complaint such as what you're talking about?
Right. I don't know of a central repository for complaints about EICs. The EIC program is administered by the Department of Public Safety, and so probably they have more information about the complaint process over there than I do. We have received some emails, I would say 3 or 4 emails from folks who have been upset about not being able to get an EIC under circumstances similar to what Ms. Haltom had discussed. And one thing that I would note is that almost every one of these cases, the person has an expired driver's license that they use for other things. You know, whenever they go to the drugstore and have to get a prescription that requires a driver's license, they'll use their expired ID for those things. And so it seems like it could be possible to modify the list of acceptable IDs for persons over a certain age to be able to use an expired driver's license. It's one possibility to address the situation.
Do you think it'd be in the state of Texas's best interest to have one depository for all those complaints?
I don't know. You know, we do a lot of things in a decentralized way in this state, so we're not used to having centralized repositories for very many things.
So we don't really know how many incidences has been out there.
I don't. Maybe the Department of Public Safety does. But I think that Tony would be the one to know, and he didn't. So.
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Say again.
He needs to pay for it.
He wants to be paid. Okay. Thanks, Brother Keith. Appreciate you, Brother Keith.
Representative Simmons.
Keith, do you know yet what type of voter participation we had in the May 10th municipal elections?
I do not. We're supposed to get the voter history. They don't have to give it for municipal elections, but if they're going to, it'll be within 30 days of the election.
General, would we say it's been less than 1%, 2%?
I don't know. Some, you know, I don't know, because some places have really hotly contested local races, and it is very, very much a local thing.
Would you say that if a city has 150,000 residents and they have 2,000 people vote for a contested city council election, that's normal or abnormal?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. Okay. Thank you.
Members, any other questions?
I did want to give you an update on some bills progress that came out of the 83rd session.
Great.
There was not a whole lot of legislative changes to the election code in the 83rd legislature, but there were some that I wanted to remark on. Okay. House Bill 396 from Ms. Thompson was successfully implemented. That requires that if an early voting clerk in a county gets a federal postcard application from a military member, they have to share that application with other election holding entities in the county, and that has been, as far as I can tell, flawlessly implemented, and so military voters have been able to vote in all the elections that they're eligible to vote in. House Bill 259 provoked quite a few phone calls to our office. It was one that said that if an entity, a public entity holding an election in one of their offices, they can't prohibit electioneering outside the 100-foot marker, but they can make reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. And so we got a lot of phone calls from entities wanting to know what that meant, and a lot of folks upset with the restrictions that were put in place as not being reasonable. And anyway, we tried to stay out of the middle of those kind of questions, but we expect that that issue will die down over time. House Bill 506 was an interesting bill from Representative Lozano that required in November that if an entity is holding an election in November and a county has a polling place inside that entity's boundary, they have to share at least one of those polling places so that voters could go to one place and vote in both elections or all three elections. I've talked to some members, and there has been some continuing sort of gamesmanship with that, and so there might be the need to tweak that a little bit. House Bill 666, the annual application for ballot by mail that Ms. Callanan talked about, it's an unfortunate number, but that process has really increased the number of applications for ballot by mail, and so it's really been a good, beneficial thing. But working the kinks out in the actual application has been the most problematic piece of legislation to implement in both the 82nd and 83rd sessions. It's just full of questions on the ground, including this voter confusion issue that Ms. Callanan talked about. Finally, House Bill 2512 requires DPS to share all the information they've got with regard to our voters. We have not yet been able to implement that because we've been focused on photo ID implementation, and we're in the middle of a redevelopment process with our voter registration database. But we expect to have that fully implemented by 2016 presidential year.
Does anyone else have any questions on any legislation?
Ms. Chair, I do have a question on, particularly you mentioned the vote by mail. I was wondering if you have done any analysis about how much. I hear generally that we did better as a state with vote by mail. Do you know how much better and by county?
I don't. I could probably get some numbers for you. One thing that I heard is that an entity holding an election normally has 300 applications for ballot by mail, and because of the annual application, they had 700. People wouldn't normally apply for a ballot by mail for that election, but they got it automatically because the county was the early voting clerk for it. So, I expect that there's that kind of, and so that's what it would be. It would be the participation would increase in the local elections where people don't normally apply for a ballot by mail, but they get it automatically because the county elections administrator is running their election.
So you don't have hard numbers. We know generally we've done better, but county by county analysis has not been done.
No, ma'am.
Would you mind if I followed up with you afterwards?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Representative Booth.
Now, Keith, I'm a little disappointed you did not mention anything about the most important election bill that went through last time, and that is Representative Miller's poll watcher ID bill. Has that been successfully implemented? Is everyone wearing their badges?
Everybody has wearing their badges. I've visited several polling locations in elections last year and this year, and all the badges are uniform. They look good. Everybody is announcing who they are in a uniform way.
That's excellent to hear, and thank you, Representative Miller, for stealing my bills.
Representative Click.
During the municipal elections, I was continuing to get calls in my area regarding municipalities and the placement of signs and electioneering, and that is continuing to be a problem. Members in one city, they had the candidates draw for where they will stand outside the polling place.
Oh, my. In a school district we heard about last fall, they actually had areas designated for different candidates to use, and of course, inevitably, the candidates feel like the other candidate got a better spot, and man, what a mess.
Yeah, it is still becoming a problem in a number of the cities. It's been more of an issue in the cities in my area than it has been the school districts, but it is a huge problem. It's whatever we say it is, and that's the way they're approaching it.
Right. Yeah, we've encouraged them to consult with their lawyers and to keep in mind that any restrictions they put in place have to be content neutral, and that's all we can do.
Any other questions for Keith or comments anyone has? Thanks,
All right,
Keith.
thank you.
We also have Roe at the Secretary of State, but he does not testify.
Of course, we also have Roe. If anyone has questions who would like to stay seated in his seat, but if you'd like to call him up, we certainly may. Thank you. Okay, the chair will now call Natalia Ashley, who is here with the Texas Ethics Commission. If you'll come and state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Morrison, Vice Chair Miles, and members of the committee. My name is Natalia Luna Ashley, and I'm the interim Executive Director and Special Counsel to the Texas Ethics Commission. I have been asked to give you a 5 to 10 minute overview about what we have been doing at the agency and to be available for questions. As you know, the Texas Ethics Commission has jurisdiction over the campaign finance laws that apply to state and municipal elections, and the lobby law that regulates the communications from lobbyists to members of the legislative and executive branch of state government, the personal financial statement disclosure laws, and some other gift laws. In the interim, we have been very, very busy answering telephone calls from people who have questions in these areas of the law. Just to kind of give you an idea of the volume of calls that we have had this year, in January alone, we received approximately 16,000 phone calls that we have been processing about our law. So one of the things that we are looking to do is to try to explore new ways to make the information that's available on our website easier to find, so to really empower our callers to find that information more quickly. Because of the volume of calls, it is taking us longer to get back to our callers. So we will continue to work with that, and also to allow us to do other things, to work on other things that are important to the state. We have also been very busy processing the reports that are required to be filed under the laws. Last year, within the last 12 months, we processed approximately 32,000 reports, and I'm really happy to say that a large majority of those, about 96%, were timely filed. And we think that a reason for that large percentage of timely reports has to do in part with the changes that the legislature made to the laws to allow us to notify our filing community of notices of upcoming deadlines by email. And the Commission, after the legislature changed the law to allow us to do that, adopted a rule to say you are not going to receive a notice to file unless you send us an email so that we can communicate with you. That allows us to send not only the initial notice but reminders about upcoming deadlines. So that has been very helpful. Of those people who are allowed to file or who have the ability to file electronically, because the law allows them to, a large majority, about 97%, file electronically. So that is huge. So we know that we have a way to communicate with 97% of our filers who file electronically, and that's really important. So we need to try to find a way to make certain information available to them in an easier format. So which brings me to our next major project. As you may recall, last session the legislature appropriated funding to the Commission to develop a new software to replace the existing software, which is very quickly becoming obsolete. And this new system will be web-based application that will allow a filer to file from anywhere in the world that they have access to the internet. They will be able to use a PC, a Mac, and other type of modern mobile devices. And we think this will also continue to improve the timeliness of reports that are required to file with the Commission, and it replaces the system that we have not only for campaign finance reports for lobby, and then it will also have a personal financial statement option to file those reports electronically. Another really important feature of the system is that it focuses not only on those filers required to file with the Commission, but also those required to file locally. You know, the campaign finance law applies to local elections as well. And, you know, the Commission is very concerned that those local filers have the same opportunities that the filers who file with the Commission to use this new system. So they will be able to use the system. They will be given a temporary ID that they can take advantage of the many features that the new software will have. For example, the new software will allow a filer to know when they are missing information rather quickly. Like, you know, if somebody misses an address, they're going to say, you're missing an address, or you're missing a zip code, you're missing contributor information. And the goal here is to minimize the number of technical errors that are made. With the limitations of the existing software, we think that, that is causing some of the errors. And also at the local filing authority or at the local filing level, they do not have, those features in the systems that they're currently using. So we are looking forward to rolling out this new system. The goal is to roll it out January, after the January semi-annual report that's due next year. So the very first report that would be filed using the new software would be the July semi-annual report due next year. In order to have a smooth transition, we are soliciting volunteers to help us test the current the new system. We anticipate that the testing will start in the fall sometime. We already have a list of people from local filers, from lobbyists, from candidates and office holders. They're going to be testing the system, giving us ideas of how to improve it, hopefully finding all the bugs to allow us to be able to have a fairly easy trouble-free filing next year. Lastly, we have been processing the many sworn complaints that are filed with the Commission. And again, the software, part of the goal with the software is to reduce those number of complaints. Many of the complaints do relate to technical issues. We have been working hard on interpreting the law through the different ways that the legislature authorizes the Commission to do so, by rulemaking and advisory opinions. We have been speaking around the state to different groups. We held a symposium in El Paso to talk to anybody who would attend this conference free of charge about the laws under the Commission's jurisdiction, how to avoid some of the common reporting errors, and we also take an opportunity to go around the state where there are large crowds who want to know about what we do, and we hope to be able to hold another symposium before the end of this fiscal year. So if you have any questions, that's my quick presentation. I certainly want to try to address any questions you may have.
Any questions, members? Representative Simmons.
I've got several questions. Thanks for coming today.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. You said that your response time has been delayed to calls. How long do you think the response time is? Somebody's calling in, ask a question. What would you say y'all getting back to them within what?
It varies. I mean, to the extent that if we're, for example, if we're having a 2-day commission meeting, the response call may be a couple of days because we are attending commission meetings. If we are not attending commission meetings, sometimes it's immediate. Sometimes it's a couple of hours, and sometimes it may be until the next day. It really depends. Like on a filing deadline, for example, the January semi-annual filing deadline this year, we had people calling from all over the state, not only those individuals who filed with the Commission, but also all the locals, the county, city, school districts, and that overlapped with a lobbying reporting deadline, and the personal financial statement was due not too far off from that.
But it's fair to say that you can anticipate when the high volume calls would come in?
Yes.
Kind of timing-wise, if they're going to be around these filing dates. Have you thought about, is there any way to increase like a temporary staff at that time that could provide some assistance? To answer some of the, especially if they're kind of basic stuff on, because I imagine 90% of the questions are pretty basic that someone could understand. They just got confused or something.
And we have all hands on deck on during the filing deadlines, and we are all on the phone. And it's as soon as we finish answering the stack of phone calls that we have, by the time we get back, we go to the front to check for more. There's another stack. Right. But really, all of us kind of drop what we're doing, making it a priority to return those calls around those filing deadlines.
Now, hopefully, under the new system, will there also be a more robust question and answer where people could answer questions online, ask questions online, and maybe there'll be frequently asked questions, or they could chat? Do we have any online chat with anybody that they could do it right there as opposed to calling in and not getting a call back or anything like that? Do we have any of those availabilities?
The new software will be more intuitive in the sense that it will ask questions at the front end to help the filer know where they need to disclose information, and if information is omitted, it will flag it immediately and help them understand what is missing. As far as the chat, that is what we do currently on the phone. I mean,
yeah, no, I'm just talking about online. Sometimes
online.
It's easier to do it that way, but that's okay. Let me move on. The personal financial statement.
Yes.
That is a disaster. My personal financial statement was 140 pages because of the way, and it's not because I've got, no, I knew that Representative Miles was going to say it. It's not because I have too much money. It's because when you have a diversified investment portfolio, whether it's, whatever, and you ask to list every single shareholder that you own, I don't mind I don't mind giving that to you, but it would be much easier if I just was able to scan a copy of my report from my custodian and send that in. Why are you making me take all that time to take it off the paper, put it on on this other paper, and send it in? That is ridiculous.
I mean, the form, the personal financial statement form, elicits what the legislature has required in the law. And so to the extent...
So the legislature doesn't give you any leadway in designing the form. They say you have to have this form, has to be printed, nothing else can be excluded. So you're saying we need a statutory change that if we wanted to be able to send in third-party custodian statements on our assets, if we had them, then we'd have to have a statutory change to do that, right?
Well, the commission did adopt a rule to say that to the extent that a filer wants to use a different form, that they can submit that form for approval, and that it will be approved as long as the form provides the information that is statutorily required. So to the extent that your information that is provided to you sets out the information that is required by law, then you know, that would be something that I would encourage you to submit for approval if that's what you would like. We do get those requests on a regular basis. Instead of completing the form, somebody might want to enter the information on a spreadsheet. Yeah. And as long as that information contains everything that's statutorily required, then there's typically not a problem with that.
Let me ask you, okay, that's good. So I learned something there. I wasted a day or two. Then on the personal financial statements, do you also require people to report nonprofit organizations of which they sit on, even though there's no compensation or anything like that? You require that?
Yeah, I mean, the way that the statute is written...
Any advisory committee, it's your understanding, anything? Like if you're on the church cookie committee, you need to put that down there?
If it's a board, including a board of a nonprofit, the way that the law is currently written, it does require that information. And we do try to clarify that point on the instructions to the personal financial statement. And we actually we explicitly state that on the instructions to the personal financial statement, because we know that if somebody's just looking at the form, they may not know that that's required. So, you know, we do encourage people to look at the instructions when they're completing the form, because it would provide that example.
Right. So when you're doing the software to redo the financial statement and the campaign reports, have y'all brought in any members or former members to give input on, hey, you know, we've done this, you know, Representative Miles has done it several times and Representative Morrison been around, hey, give us your input on how we ought to design this? Because you haven't been on, you maybe have you been on our side of the table?
Oh, no, not at all.
So have y'all done that, or how do we decide how we're going to do it? How'd that go?
Well, I mean, we are certainly looking for volunteers to help us with testing the software and giving us ideas. But
I'm not talking about testing. I'm talking about designing it to start with.
Designing it. What we are doing with the designing is currently what you have is you have a form and you complete
right.
So the new software the commission has hired a professional software developing company to help with that, and it will be an interview style type of report. It will say, kind of like TurboTax, you know, what type of information are you wanting to disclose? Are you wanting to disclose this information? And if so, it will take you to that spot. So it's not a filling the blank like it is now. Okay. It's going to guide, and this is true also for campaign finance, you know. Are you showing money coming in or are you showing money going out? Oftentimes there's that confusion. What is a contribution? What's an expenditure? So, I mean, we're using that same interview style for the personal financial statement as well. We are looking to see, we have other states who have recently developed a new system, and so they've shared what they're doing, and so we're looking at that too.
Good. Let me ask you another question now. You talked about complaints. I think your last point was on complaints that, you know, during campaign season that gets crazy. I'm disturbed by the negative campaigning and misleading campaigning. I mean, I'm reading the one right here that that got sent to my son that said, blame this particular candidate. Now, he was one out of 4 commissioners and a county judge, but he's the one to blame for all the traffic in this particular county. He is absolutely the one to blame. And obviously that's misleading. All right? It doesn't matter what side of the fence it's on. In my opinion, I think the reason people do that is because there's not enough deterrent to keep them from doing that. How is somebody in our system deterred from putting out a misleading statement, like putting somebody's picture on a whiskey bottle and sending that out? I mean, what do we do about that? I mean, it just drives me crazy.
I mean, I'm not sure what to do about that. I mean, currently the laws do prohibit certain things about a communication of political advertising. You cannot say that you're the incumbent when you're not. You have to have certain type of disclosure statement. So it has to be the true source of the communication. So I can't say that.
I just don't know there's enough deterrent, though, because by the time all that happens, the race is over. I think if there's a $100,000 fine if you're shown for putting out misleading information, people may not do it. But it's crazy.
It's a free speech issue.
Well, I mean,
it's not free speech to say something about somebody that's not right. That's not free speech.
Well,
at least where I come from, that's called a lie.
I think if you tell a straight out lie about someone, that person can sue you for defamation. That's usually the way it's handled. You sue.
Usually doesn't overturn.
If you say like somebody was convicted for a DWI and they actually have not,
right?
You can sue them in court and recover damages. But what problem is, I think what you're talking about is people to tell half truths.
Yeah, or a quarter or whatever.
Make misleading statements. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any law about misleading statements.
Drives me crazy.
You don't want your candidate telling people how rich you are.
I own 3 shares of IBM and 2 shares of AT&T.
I aspire to have your problems, brother. I really do.
So, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you answering my question. I am going to take your word that our filing system is going to be better, but I will tell you I'm taking it with a jaundiced view because it is one of the most confusing, non-logic type of accounting systems that I've ever been a part of, and I've seen a lot of them. So I am looking forward to the improvements very much.
Well, and one thing, our commissioners in the interim also have been trying to see, well, how can we require disclosure in a way that's more intuitive? And so that's one thing we've looked at is if you receive a contribution, for example, whether it's a cash contribution or an in-kind, it all gets reported in one spot, so it's hard to tell what's what. Right. So now they're actually dividing it, and the software will say, here's money actually coming in. If it's not actual cash, then you report it over here. So just trying to, that's our hope. We've spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, and really that's the test group, and I'd love for any of you who have the time, because I know you all are all really busy, but if you have time to volunteer and give us feedback when we test in the fall, that's what we're looking for, to try to get some feedback from not only the TEC filers, but also from local filers, because they come from with different experiences.
Thank you very much.
Other questions?
Representative Simmons and I will volunteer.
There you go.
Okay.
I have somebody that will.
Representative Click.
In the updates with the software, you said that it would be a web-based program. Currently, if you use a Mac, you have to use the web-based, and it's a nightmare.
It is. We recognize that, and that has been one of the biggest complaints. It's just that developing a software, is of course very expensive. We cannot do it without the legislature's assistance. But the goal is that a Mac, it does not matter whether you're using a PC or a Mac. It's all going to be web-based driven, and the web-based application that you're using now is nothing like what the new software will be like.
Well, it's really important because some of us like to enter that as you go.
Right.
We're able to do that and not have to sit down all at once and enter it, because you're more likely to get errors in going that approach. So
That's right. I mean, the current web application that is available on the Commission's website, it really is intended to, you sit down and you enter all the information. At one time. The new software will not be like that. It will allow you to do what current software does. I mean, so we don't want to take away what the current software affords as far as that goes. You can enter information as you go, and that's a feature that will exist in the new software.
Yeah, and I've even tried using playing with Parallels, which will allow you to do a virtual PC, and have not found that it works very well. So I'm still using an LPC.
Really? Okay. Well, I'm hoping that this new software will address that concern. I mean, that's one of our requirements for the new software.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Ms. Ashley?
Thank you for
You're
being
welcome.
here very much.
Members, that's all the witnesses that we have signed up to testify on interim charge number 6. Is there anyone else that we missed that wanted to say something? All right, hearing none. Members, that is all the business to come before the committee today. Does anyone have any announcements or anything they need to let us know? Anyone? All right. Well, hearing none, the House Committee on Elections stands adjourned, subject to call of the chair. Thank you.
Are we done with all of our interim?
This is it. Yeah.
We're done. Don't you have a new budget report? Lou's got a new budget. You don't want everybody to write the report?
Yeah.
8 months. 8 months ago.
Still new.